Bang ding ding, trademark. He come out 6'7" tall. Bang ding ding, one is star. Bang dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding. It is a perfect day.
Woke up to the sound of the garbage truck again. Upstairs neighbor's toilet's leaking on my head. And cars broke down, I missed the bus, there runs a 10. I had a feeling this was a day to stay in bed. I finally left my pad right on the jumbo's cloud roof. A police officer pulled out his gun and said, I said, sir, you got the wrong guy. I guess it's just a perfect day. It's just a perfect day. Na, 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 na.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of Eggs. This is the 2020 Thanksgiving Spectacular. For people who've been fans of the show or have followed us over the last couple of years, you know, every year around Thanksgiving, we traditionally anyway have done a little clip show, you know, featuring some fun things, or maybe sometimes we'll put out a little bonus show where we, you know, just have a little spitball conversation. And that's kind of what this is too. You know, this year has been a really interesting year in the evolution of our show, in that we have had guests for virtually every show. You know, people who are also fans and listeners have noticed an occasional day off here and there where we would take, you know, we couldn't record 1 week or something, so we would put out a clip show or a best of or something like that. And, you know, honestly, we've been so dang busy and so dang blessed with guests this year that we just have not been able to really bother with a clip show. It just, everybody is worthy of their own appearance. So tonight, Mike and I were visiting. We decided it would be a good time to get together and give thanks and do this little spectacular show together. In the past, we've had, you know, miscellaneous random guests. And this time it's just the two of us, unless some random people show up. There are people coming by my house, so it's hard to know. We may get some random guests poke their head in. But yeah, so anybody, let's get on with the show. Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
Dude, so good. And this is another thing, and maybe we should point out, like, I think since quarantine started, so like this is going back, I count it from January because basically I haven't left my house since like January. But I think that Mike and I have seen each other in person maybe once, maybe twice.
Not even that. I showed up at your house to get some gear and you weren't there. So and you let me in.
You came by. I remember you coming by one time, but like at a long distance.
Yeah.
It was right after, I think maybe right after you got that car.
Yeah.
Unless I'm blurring years, but I think you sort of came down here. You just had to poke into Salt Lake for a minute.
Well, I got the car 1 year ago today. So if that's the case, really? We haven't seen each other in a year.
Oh, wow.
In person.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you know, obviously this year has been crazy, tumultuous for everybody, to say the least. You know, I mean, luckily, I don't think Mike has been blessed to have the Rona. I did have it, although I didn't experience any symptoms or anything. So,
oh, you actually tested positive?
Yep. So just asymptomatic, as they say. So I guess I'm lucky in that sense. You know, I didn't get it as bad as a lot of people have. So it's been a crazy year. But Mike, especially in the early months, you know, spends a lot of time in and around his parents, and you know, just didn't want to gamble on this COVID stuff, you know, because we just didn't know anything about it. And honestly, even now, I mean, given what we do know, you probably don't really want to gamble on it that much.
Yeah.
And so, you know, so Mike kind of kept his distance. We had a studio here in Salt Lake City that basically became unusable. So we don't have a studio anymore. Now we're just kind of doing the show from our homes, like so many other people. And, you know, and so basically Mike hasn't been traveling into Salt Lake the way he used to do. And, you know, just given the circumstances, it makes perfect sense. And so, but as a result, you know, we haven't hardly seen each other in person. So, we come together every week to do the show and everything. And we, you know, maybe get a little small talk or a little banter prior to the show, or maybe a few minutes after or whatever. But, you know, really it's been kind of a weird year because I just don't feel like we have seen each other as much as I guess I was taking for granted last year, because I got to see, you know, work with you almost every day last year.
Yeah, we used to do like a weekly, pre-funk at the bar across the street from the studio and kick it. And
yeah, I mean, that's one of the things I miss the most, actually. Me and my family went to lunch downtown Salt Lake today, right across from there, the place called the Red Rock Brewery. Went down there for lunch, but right next door is this little bar called the Poplar Street Pub. And when Mike and I were in the studio together, we'd come down, we'd do our little show, and either, like he said, we'd go pre-funk over there and have a drink or two, or after the show, we'd go over and grab lunch or whatever. And I really miss it. In fact, I pointed it out to the kids today. That was the place I love going because they have these great black bean burgers and like quinoa burgers and stuff like that. I'm not like a super granola guy, but I love that black bean burger.
Well, it's delicious, and their other food's delicious too.
Yeah, everything at Poplar is awesome. And so, yeah, it was great to be able to go there and just crack a beer and hang out.
Well, and it's also kind of that pseudo dive bar. It's like it's not complete garbage trashy bar, but it's not super high end. You're going to spend.
It's got an element of scuzz somewhere in there. Somebody scraped their name into the toilet seat.
Hey, don't rat on me.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, for all the good things, and ultimately, I think that's where Mike and I want to focus today's conversation is really around all the good things that happened this year.
There were some good things that happened this year.
Oh, I'm sure of it. If we dig deep, maybe we can come across a couple. But yeah, I mean, but I would say sort of one of the negatives or the negative byproduct of all this stuff is just that Mike and I haven't been able to spend as much time in person as we would have liked. Nonetheless, I'm really thrilled with this year of the show. I think that, we continue to turn corners. We continue to interview exciting guests and have great conversations. And so I'm really thrilled that despite all this, despite COVID, everything else, that we've been able to sort of keep it together.
Yeah, it's definitely been a struggle at times, especially with the distance and the lack of internet and the lack of,
Yeah, just everything, right?
Yeah.
Well, and that's like maybe one of the bigger things, and I don't know if you've got anything you'd like to say about it, but so a couple weeks ago, back on episode 175, we did or aired an interview that Mike did with Yukon Smitty, this awesome old school miner dude up in Alaska, just a veteran of the mining industry. But before that, we had a little bit of a chat about where Mike's been all summer. And I think that it might be kind of fun to talk about that just because it's such a unique experience. For basically not only were we at a distance for much of this year, really most of the summer, Mike was at like an incredible distance. He was like about as far away as you can get. And, we managed to pull together a few shows, but, there were some connectivity issues and other things like this that prohibited us from getting together. And but anyway, that I think is, one of the more interesting hurdles that we've had to overcome this year.
Well, yeah, it was definitely a good thing that we had a backlog of shows because I think we would have ended up missing a few weeks if not. It was perfectly timed. We had just the right amount of shows pre-recorded and edited and uploaded and ready to go before I left the second time. So it was good that we had that, and it was also a really good experience. It was for those of you that haven't heard or listened, I was up in Nome, Alaska for a better part of the summer, and then I came back for a few weeks, and then I actually went back a second time. I don't know that we brought that up or not.
Yeah, and actually, I don't think you and I have spoken much since then. We've done a couple shows since then, but I don't think we've spoken just like about that leg of the trip and how it went.
Yeah, I went back the second time to help Ian Foster from Bering Sea Gold. He was one of our interviews from a while ago. He and a business partner of his ended up buying a piece of property up there and doing a remodel on it to flip it. And he was coming down to a time crunch. And for those of you who haven't been to Nome, which is probably all of you, when it gets cold, you can't really do much up there. You're kind of in lockdown over the winter. You go inside and you stay inside for the winter. He was kind of in a position where it was just him. He didn't have any other help, and he needed some more help to finish this project. And so I went up a second time and spent another month up there, pretty much just finishing up the remodel and getting it ready to sell. And that was another great experience. It was, during the summer, you're up there and it's light pretty much 22 hours of the day. So the sun doesn't really set. And in the winter, the sun doesn't really come up. So as I was there, the days kept getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And essentially by the time I left, you only had 3-4 hours of sunlight.
Yeah, that's got to be a crazy experience. It's funny. I was just listening to Joe Rogan with Dave Chappelle and just a couple days ago. And he was talking about a time that he had toured up to Anchorage, and he was going up there and he was talking about just how surreal it was to have those days that are just like 22-hour days, like what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be interesting to experience for sure.
Oh, it is. I actually got to spend a day or two in Anchorage this trip. On my way back, I actually didn't realize it, but I had about a 24-hour layover in Anchorage, and so I took full advantage of that and walked around. I got a hotel room that was kind of central area, and I was able to just kind of walk and check it out, and I actually could see myself living there. It's kind of like it reminds me of living in like Anacortes or in Washington area, but more of it's like a big small town.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, I mean, I've never been, but it seems to me like it would be like a Park City or a Jackson Hole or something like that, where you've got incredible outdoors and wildlife and animals and all this stuff, but still sort of the niceties of the city.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. It's kind of like you have all the amenities that you could want, but you also have the ability to escape and get the hell out of there and do some fun, outdoorsy stuff if you want. And that's kind of what I enjoy. I love, fishing and hiking and the woods and trees and all the fun stuff that comes with being kind of remote like that. Yeah. And Nome is actually kind of a little too remote for me. Like I enjoyed it, but it's,
well, yeah, for people who don't know, like, you have to fly into Anchorage and then take another plane out there, right? Like, I mean, it's not somewhere just can drive to.
Yeah, there's no roads connecting to Nome. You have to fly in. And they actually tried to put a railroad in at one point, and they stopped 30 miles short. Because,
yeah, they're just like, screw this, we're done.
Well, in like the 1800s, it's called the Train to Nowhere, and if you Google it, you'll see this picture of a train in the middle of like a swamp, and they were building the tracks up there and just gave up. And there's an old train that just sitting in the middle of nowhere with no tracks, no nothing to it, and it's kind of surreal. It's pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, it's so funny because like I did a little bit of looking at Nome online, like, on Google Maps or whatever, after you went up there or after you were going to go up there. Just because I don't know anything about the place, I mean, it's the only like background I had on Nome at all was like ancient Iditarod history that I vaguely remember from some like U.S. history class, the thing where they had to get like the penicillin or something up to Nome. And, and I think that's basically was the birth of this Iditarod race that they do now, right?
I haven't really done the research on that. I'll have to look that up.
I think that's, if I remember right, I think that's how it shook out, is basically there was a medical emergency in the winter and they needed to get penicillin or something like that out to Nome. And the only way to do it was by dog sled. And so, some brave guy went and braved the winter up there and made it to Nome and was able to deliver this medicine, or at least this is how it's romanticized, right?
Yeah.
And I believe that now the Iditarod race that they do is like sort of a salute to that guy, or for that sort of journey. I believe that's where it comes from, and I could be totally wrong. That's why you come to Eggs, for great conversation that may not be accurate. So, yeah. And I'm we're not officially sponsored, but I am drinking a Wasatch Polygamy Porter, and that may sort of lubricate my historical facts.
Well, speaking of the Iditarod, there's your Iditarod glass from 2011. But no, yeah, like while I was up there the second time, it was interesting because before it snows, the people who actually have dog sled teams will actually hook them up to a four-wheeler and train their dogs towing a four-wheeler. And while I was there, 2 or 3 times they would come up and down our driveway towing this four-wheeler with a whole dog sled team pulling it. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, I could imagine someplace like that. Like, I'm kind of more of a city kid, or I've always seen myself as a city kid, I should say.
You're from Pocatello. That's not a city kid.
Well, not because, because I spent my whole life trying to flee. I was always a fan of the bigger cities. And but a couple of years ago at Christmas, so we do this thing in our family where we we decided to stop buying presents and start buying experiences, right? So instead of spending a lot of money on disposable things, now we try and, do a little trip each year, right? So the first year we went to Disneyland. 2 years ago, we went to this place called Island Park, which is sort of by West Yellowstone. And then this last year we went to San Francisco. Well, when we went to West Yellowstone, we rented a big house, and because there was our family and then my in-laws and some my parents and stuff like that. And so we rented this big old house to go up and stay in. But I mean, it was pretty isolated, really limited internet, no Wi-Fi or anything. You can maybe muster a little bit on your cell phone, but barely enough to read it, get a tweet. And it had the modern conveniences there. I mean, it had like a DVD player and stuff like that, but you were sort of secluded from the outside world. And we were up there about 10 days. And I will tell you, in those 10 days of sort of being disconnected, it was like, I don't know if I felt like, so I don't know how to describe it, maybe like clear in a long time, just like no riffraff from email and internet, no riffraff on social media, just, totally peaceful, at ease. And it wasn't until that trip just this couple of years ago that I was like, God, maybe I like this.
Yeah.
Like all this time I thought I was dying to live in the city, but maybe what I really want is to run away from everyone. I mean, I'm a big DoorDash guy, and they don't have that in Island Park yet, so I'm not sure if that'll work out. But
so Nome is really quite like that. Every time we would go home from leaving the city, like half the time you're in the city, your phone doesn't work. So
well, and you were telling me something funny that they have to use like Instagram messaging or something because the text messages move so slow.
So if you would send me a text message, I would get it like 12 times, the same message on repeat over and over and over again. And I could get it within 10 seconds, or I could get it 8 hours later. It's just weird the way that the cell phone towers are set up, or maybe it's just Verizon or whatever, but text messaging just didn't work. And so it's actually better to use like Facebook Messenger or Instagram or one of those to communicate, because it's instant and you don't have the problems that come with text messaging. So
yeah, that was so interesting to me, and it made me think that, there's probably, just because it's, tiny little town, tiny little everything, they probably have like maybe sort of like limited bandwidth or something. Again, this is me, offering advice that's probably not legitimate. Well, my thought is that they probably have a limited number of towers, and they have so much bandwidth to push through for that whole city, right? So it seems like there would be delays and things like that just to make sure that everything gets done.
For example, just having internet at your house isn't cheap. It's like minimum is $200 a month. If you want unlimited data, it's like $400 a month. Oh, wow. And so it's
and it's probably that, right? People pay for priority access on these, very limited infrastructure items. Everything probably comes into town via satellite or cellular signal or something.
Well, I don't know exactly how it's set up, but I do know that there's not a lot of people using it. And so the provider that is there has to charge a premium to cover the cost of just setting it up in the first place. I suppose
that makes sense. So, but it's funny, those are the things that you just don't think of. So it's like, it wouldn't even occur to me that you would be able to go somewhere that is technically the United States and basically not be able to just sort of use your phone the way you would use your phone anywhere. Yeah. But it's also interesting what you just said is that not everybody uses it, because it's so ubiquitous in like sort of our daily lives that everybody is using their cell phone. They're always on their phone. It's always, it's attached to you at the hip. Yeah. The idea that you might go somewhere where that isn't the case seems kind of crazy too.
Well, it's actually kind of like you said, when you went up to Island Park and didn't have access, it's kind of a relief, it's going home every night.
Seems like it'd be a little refreshing.
Yeah, it's great. Where we were staying, we didn't have power, we didn't have electricity, we didn't have running water, we didn't have any of that stuff. And after a while, you pick up a book and start reading it, and it's one of those things that like, when's the last time I read a book?
Yeah.
it's
that's awesome though. Nice. But I think it's one of those things that's like just sort of lost,
Yeah.
Like because like I said, it's just everything's become so ubiquitous that we don't take advantage of people. We don't take advantage of books. We don't take advantage of any of those things, Why learn anything? It's all at the touch of your phone,
Yeah. And I'm a big audiobook person, and
so you're screwed on two fronts: no internet, and you need a device to listen to it.
Well, so what I would do is when I go into town, I would throw my phone and my laptop on a charger, and then the I hardly ever had to use the laptop. And so what I would do is I would download everything on my Audible account and have it on my phone. And when the battery would die, I would use my laptop as like a battery bank to charge my phone.
The world's most expensive
battery charger
pack.
Yeah. And it worked good. I mean, I could get 2 or 3 charges out of it. And, you know, usually we would go into town at least once a day. But if not, I mean, like, I could get by for a little bit. And not having access to the internet was actually kind of nice. You know, like, I had a legitimate excuse to blow off emails and blow off, you know.
Well, and you kind of, I guess you start to realize like how good it is to not have that stuff. Like, you know, it's funny because, you know, I spent a lot of time thinking about remote work and stuff like that. And one of the big downfalls of remote work, or even just like the freelance lifestyle, like I live all these years, is basically you're kind of at people's beck and call like any given time, right? They could Slack you, they could send you an email, they can send you a text, whatever. Like you're never truly off work. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, a lot of people, you know, impose timers and different things like that and try and distance themselves a little bit, but it's really hard, and it takes a conscious effort just to kind of break that connection.
Yeah.
And so having something physical kind of break it for you. I mean, while yes, it's a convenience to be able to jump on and use Google Maps, or, you know, to be able to quickly respond to some message or to get a message out when you need to. Like, I mean, obviously those are great conveniences, but I think we forget so much, or it's so easy to forget, you know, sort of how it was before. And like you and I are approximately the same age, or pretty close to the same age. And, you know, so we have, I guess, kind of the benefit of having lived sort of in the before time and in the after time. Like we had time in our lives where we didn't have a phone or something attached to us. And, you know, and for me, like I started pretty early. I started on pagers. Like, so I had pagers, and then I had actually, like, you know, early cell phones and stuff like that.
I used to rebaud pagers. I would say you had a pager for AT&T or Bell or whatever back in the day. You could actually have it switched over from one carrier to another. And to do that, you actually had to send it into a company. They would solder a new chip in and program it to the right frequency for that company. And I used to actually do that. I would sit in a copper
awesome.
enclosure and solder these little chips in, and then tune the frequency to the right company and then send them back. And I mean, most people these days don't even remember what a pager is, and I used to work on them.
Yeah. Well, so and that's the thing, right? I mean, even listen to the way I'm talking about it, it's so flippant. Oh yeah, I started with pagers. And for most of the people listening to the show, they probably don't even know what that is.
Well,
yeah, it's pretty crazy how far things have come, right? So, I mean, but the point I was trying to make is that, you know, I was an early adopter of technology, but even at that, I mean, there was a good 15, 16 years of my life that, you know, near the end, near like 16, 17, we finally got like a 56K dial up, you know, kind of internet access, which, you know, nowadays would be atrocious. I mean, and, you know, I mean, now I just got a new phone, and it's got it's a 5G and everything. And I mean, it's like, the speed that this thing is capable of is like better than I get at my house, let alone, you know, what I used to get on my computer. And so it's just interesting. I think that, you know, our generation is sort of advantaged in that way, that we have this little bit of time, or this little glimpse into what it was like without those things. So when, for example, you go to Nome, you can tolerate it, right? Yeah. Like you understand this, you know, this is something you've seen before.
Well,
I look at people like my kids, you know, I mean, basically, you know, as soon as they were old enough to hold a phone, they had something, you know, an iPod or a tablet or a Fire Stick, you know, something to play on.
Think of road trips. You know, back in the day, we would listen to CDs, audiobooks, or
try and catch a radio station between
the rest
cities
of the story by what's his name?
Paul Harvey.
Paul Harvey. I remember listening to that as a kid as we're going on road trips, and now it's like. You know, they have their iPad and their movies and their headphones, and they all do their own thing. And it's like,
well, and then God forbid the battery dies or something, right? Then it's the end of the world. You know, I'm constantly getting after my kids, telling them, you just look out the window, look around, like have some awareness of where you are in the world.
Yeah.
Because one of these days when you're lost and you don't know your way around, it's good to have a good sense of direction. Like you should understand where you are.
Remember trying to find a place pre-GPS?
Oh God!
I used to be able to read maps. I probably couldn't do that anymore.
Well, it's so funny because like I have a good sense of direction. Like, you know, as long as I've sort of been to a place before, I usually can kind of log it away, right?
Yeah.
And so even if I don't know maybe exactly like where something is pinpoint wise, you give me a couple landmarks, I can get close. And that includes, a lot of these like sort of West Coast cities, the cities that I went to, over the years. And I can kind of find my way around. But my wife, like, without even without a cell phone, she'd just be lost. Like, she would just stand in one corner all day and never leave.
It's a good thing she doesn't listen to this.
Yeah. Well, see, that's what she gets. We were talking earlier about what super fan my wife is when she asked me, what our domain website URL was, because she didn't know. And and wasn't even willing to try Googling it. That's how offended I was. Anyway, but yeah, no, I mean, it's so funny how much things have changed. And I mean, I guess we sound like a couple of old timers here talking about it. But the point is, I mean, being re-exposed to that sometimes, like you were up in Nome, I think is more of a gift than anything.
Well, and to be honest with you, I've kind of embraced it. I don't know if you've been on Instagram lately or not, but I don't have an account anymore.
Good for you.
Yeah, I deleted Facebook a long time ago. I deleted my Twitter account, and my Instagram account is on suspend right now, and I don't know if I'm going to reactivate it.
Well, and I have to imagine it feels like just a weight lifted off of you. I mean, even if you're not real active on it, like I'm not particularly active on Instagram. I need to do a little bit of marketing just for some of the businesses I'm working with and stuff like that. But like, I mean, in terms of my day to day, like I don't tweet lunch. I don't Facebook post, where I was last night. I don't do any of that kind of stuff. And but there's kind of this like lingering pressure to post something, anything.
Yeah.
Especially if you spend any time looking, right? So I'll look at it on occasion and I'll flip through on occasion, but I almost never post anything.
Well, so I was getting to the point where I would open my phone and the first thing I would check is Instagram. And I don't know, it was, it's one of those, it's almost like an addiction. And
it's the butt pictures. That's what it is. It's
not even that. Butt. Well, and what's the point? I mean, like here, I'm going to show a picture of my dinner and a picture of, like, I actually would try and, like, if I saw something cool, like in Nome, there's a ton of, like, the sunsets and a lot of people can't experience that stuff. And so I was trying to share that, but in general, I mean, what's the point? I'm better than you. I've got this. You don't have that. Here, look at what I can do. Look at that. And it's like, fuck that shit. I don't need that.
Well, and that's one of the big tragedies with like Instagram, because I'm the same. I'm notorious. I get on it almost every morning, and it's so bad that the iPhone now makes like recommendations of what you're going to do next.
Yeah.
So when I pick up my phone, the first thing it says Instagram almost viewed every morning or whatever.
Oh,
it's like, oh, great.
Well, and that was part of it too. Is like I'd Google something and all of a sudden there's an ad in my Instagram feed for something I Googled 2 days ago. Yeah. And the same with Facebook. And it's getting to the point where I just don't need this in my life anymore. And, if you don't get my updates and see what the hell I'm doing, then are we really friends? I mean, it's like, text me.
Yeah, that's kind of the existential question, right? Like, I mean, how close are we if this is how you know me?
Yeah.
And
then it's also like, if the tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, did it actually, that whole shit? It's like, if you don't post on Facebook and no one's there to see it, did it really happen? It's like, screw that. I don't need this.
Yeah, and I think that's a better way to be perfectly honest, is get off those things. And, I need to watch the, what's that new documentary that's out on Netflix? The Social Dilemma, I think it's called. And so I heard the guy on Joe Rogan's show, the guy that was behind that, this guy, Tristan something. And, but he, spent a lot of time on Joe's show outlining this stuff. I need to go watch the documentary. But when you sort of learn how everything is just sort of programmed to make you into this like trained ape, that will just jump through the hoops that they want you to jump through and do the things that they want you to do so that you can get that little, little drip of, happiness or whatever you derive from your hearts and your likes and all this stuff. Like, it's just, I don't know, it's kind of gross. And, I've honestly never gotten real deep into social media. My relationship with it has always been that it was sort of a necessary evil of whatever I was working on.
I was thinking, like, initially, I'm a DJ. I need to promote myself. We have a podcast. We need to promote the podcast. We have that, like, having a social presence was important. And then I was listening to, I don't know what podcast it was, but they brought up this fact that, like, he actually broke it down percentage wise of, you know, like how many people actually follow you on your business or your podcast or whatever you're doing based off of your social platform. And it's like 0.5% of the total people that are actually doing it, and your time posting it didn't make sense. It was like not worth the effort to do it. And so I kind of started thinking of that as like, you know, like, yeah, what is the point? And I don't know. I'm listening to this book right now called The Addictive Brain. It's one of the great courses, and they talk about, you know, like why you're addicted to smoking, why you're addicted to drinking, why you're addicted to Instagram or social media. It's all the same stuff. And you think about like the casinos and the people that, you know, play slot machines. It's the same kind of trigger, the same kind of thing. Like, ooh, flashy lights here, put my money in, take my money, do this. And it just, I don't know. I don't like being, you know, the puppet at the end of the strings trying to, I don't know. I don't like it.
No, I get it. And I think that's actually, you know, it's very true. I mean, I would say that in my experience, you know, with social media for both myself, you know, for like the podcast, for my personal stuff, for, you know, clients that we do work for, stuff like that. Like, I mean, social media is maybe the least of the things we do.
Yeah.
Now, I think that there can be value in building community, and ultimately that boils down to building relationships and stuff. So I've seen Facebook groups that work and some things like this where people are engaged and you have a highly engaged community. And I think that that's valuable, right? Because I think there's a way for this to work. But I think, you know, the type of social media you and I are talking about is largely this, you know, here's me taking a picture of myself in front of somebody else's green Lamborghini so that you'll think I have a green Lamborghini. You know, and it's this kind of stuff. And, you know, and I've fallen victim to it. You know, I started looking at that stuff and then immediately I go, well, how come I don't have a yacht? Or how come that asshole is cruising, you know, I don't know, Brussels, and I'm stuck here in stupid Salt Lake, you know? Or I look at a lot of artists, right? I follow a lot of designers and illustrators and stuff. And it's like, oh, well, how come I'm not that good? How come I can't do that?
Well, okay.
You know, and
so
you start
like,
really doubting yourself and tearing yourself down, but it's because of the stuff you're seeing. You're not getting anything positive out of it.
So even with LinkedIn, for example, I was telling you just a second ago about some dude that stole my email address off of LinkedIn and added me to his mailing list. And, you know, once I figured that out, I removed our connection and I whittled that down. But I will follow people with Instagram or whatever when I did have it, that were people that I looked up to or people that I wanted to learn from. DJ Q is an example of that. He is a producer that does remixes for like Madonna and Lady Gaga and these big artists that are official remixes for. And he'll do live streams where you can actually watch him doing the remix from start to finish. And that's a good way to learn. But,
Sure.
You know, trying to follow someone and see what kind of shoes they wear or what kind of yacht they have or this.
Careful with that shoe talk.
Sorry.
No, I think it's a good point, and I think it's true. I think that, you know, but I think it's also a lot like anything, right? Like, you know, there's good and bad, right? So there's good things and bad things. But like you were just describing from this book you're listening to or this course you're listening to, you know, maybe the good isn't actually worth the bad. You know, like, I mean, you know, yes, you can get these positive things from social media, but to try and make it this foregone conclusion that everybody must be on social media or else.
Yeah.
You know, I think you pick and choose and you do your thing. And, you know, and I'm sort of like you. I mean, I do social media out of what I believe to be a necessity, and I do it when we get paid to do it. But it's actually not my number one modality. It's not the thing we recommend to clients.
Well, and I don't know, I'm kind of on edge. Like I could actually full on delete my Instagram account. But I haven't done that, because I don't know if there's any pictures that I would like to pull off of there at some point. And B, I don't know if I'll need the handle later for something. Yeah. And whether or not I need the handle, it's kind of like, I don't want someone to steal it and then have to no,
so it's a weird nightmare. I've been trying to get one for our little wood carving company, Whittle, for a while, because there's this woman in Wisconsin who is using the last name Whittle, you know, or the handle Whittle. And we can't get it from her. We've asked, we've tried to buy it.
And she probably doesn't have a single picture posted or anything.
No, she does. But it's funny because when we first noticed her and we first started to try to follow her, she had like one post on there that was like a couple of years old. Yeah. And then suddenly like all of a sudden now she posts like every week or two
because you
And
said something.
but it was because
yeah.
we brought it up, right? Now somebody wants this thing.
So I have
yeah.
the same problem with so my company's name is called AudioStar, and I've reached out to the guy that owns the domain, and he hasn't had a website since as long as I've had the company name, and he doesn't promote it. He doesn't do anything with it. And I said, hey, let me buy it off you. It's like, not for sale. And I'm like, whoa, well, I mean, you're not using it. Why not sell it to me? And so, I mean, like, that to me is weird, but
yeah. It's a pain. Yeah, no, I've had a few of those where I've tried to go scoop up an email or a domain and move with no luck.
Yeah.
So I meant to say this like half an hour ago, but so the guy you were up in Nome with, this guy Ian Foster, he was episode 84. So if you're interested in that, but the reason I'm bringing it up now is because we thought that was kind of in recent history. That episode was in December of 2018, if you can believe that it was that long ago.
Wow.
And so it I guess maybe brings us back full circle to this idea of just sort of discussing kind of what we're here to do today, which is, just sort of, express a little bit of gratitude and thank people and just sort of be thrilled for this opportunity that we've had to do this show together, but also just sort of, the things that we've had to work through and overcome. And when I pulled up this date, and like I say, the only reason I'm calling back to it after, a half-hour discussion on the evils of social media is that it was in 2018. I mean, it was literally almost 3 years ago now.
Wow.
And so like we're coming up on that, and it's, it's pretty nuts to think that we're getting ready to enter into 2021 and that we've been at this that long. And that was episode 84. So there's 84 prior weeks.
Wow.
And so
a solid year before that. We're coming on for, wow.
Yeah, if you can even believe it. And it's funny, so this year, Mike and I hit a big milestone, which was 3 years of the Egg Show. And we didn't make a lot of, hooting and hollering or really anything out of it, to be perfectly honest, in large part because of the state of things and COVID and travel and people not being here, or Mike was gone or I was gone or whatever. And it just, we had a show to run, so we ran the show. But, if you think about it, like that's a pretty significant milestone. I get little kicks every now and then, because, in the podcasting space, obviously it's becoming more and more crowded. But, and there are people who obviously have been at it longer than us, but a lot of people don't make it past, episode 10 or episode 20 or whatever. And so, and I see every now and then on the, evil social medias, I'll see on a Twitter or something, hey, the big celebration, we made it to episode 29 today, or whatever. And I'm like, what are we talking about? Episode 29? And so it's funny when I think about it, just because, we've been at this for some time, and if you think about sort of the, humble beginnings, sitting in the pool house at my old apartment, back in North Salt Lake, almost, 3 years and some change ago.
Well, and even
pretty fantastic.
The journey that we went on from there to now. I mean, we went from there to owning a recording studio for podcasting to not owning a recording studio to back into our house doing it remote. And it's like, it's been an interesting trip. For sure.
I think one thing that's really cool about it, though, is it's a testimony to just how cool and how flexible this is. I heard a podcaster talking about podcasting the other day, and they were just talking about how this particular format, this platform, was totally designed for COVID, right? I mean, like the fact that we can use technology and leverage our abilities to connect with one another over distance, put together a show like this and get it out to the masses is pretty incredible. And you couldn't do that with almost any other format. I mean, it's really cool. And so I think all that sort of, just adds to sort of just the, I don't know, the gratitude or the, excitedness I have about doing this, because I think that, now as we're, turning the corner, this episode will end up being number 184. That's not a small undertaking. That's pretty impressive to be able to pull together, nearly 200 episodes. And, and that'll be my first kudo or first thank you is that.
On top of that, if you think about it, maybe 20 or 30 of those, not even 30, probably 25 of those are just me and you. The rest are with guests. Or, so it's...
Yeah, honestly, it may be more than that. Like if you went back and you looked at it a little bit, because I know our first 10 were you and I alone. And then around 11 or 12 or something like that, we picked up our first guest. And at that
was
point...
Was that Anderson Blue?
No, our very first one, Oh shoot! Why am I spacing out on his name? He now does a Dungeons and Dragons podcast, which is pretty awesome. So it cracks me up. Anyway, shoot, I'm spacing out on his name. Give me 1 second. I'm looking him up. And I'm kind of a dick for not knowing.
Insert Jeopardy theme song. Actually, I'll do that
Rip
at weddings.
Trebek. Yeah, Rip Trebek.
Yeah. At weddings, if we're like, they tell me, "Hey, announce the bouquet toss," and they're not ready for it or whatever, I actually have the Jeopardy theme song that I'll play as a joke.
Well, that's awesome. Well, don't be a stranger. Throw it in right there while I was looking this up.
For sure.
So anyway, our first guy, and sorry for spacing out on this name. I just saw the guy. I mean, I guess it's been 2 years ago now, but he's a sweetheart of a guy. His name's Will Truren.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it was from a group called Noble Folk Design, and now he's got a great Dungeons and Dragons podcast. I should find the name. Yeah. But Will was the first guy willing to sort of take a chance on us. That was episode 15. So there's 15 shows prior to that you and I did alone. And what's particularly interesting too, if you go back to those early episodes, and I would encourage you not to, but if you were to go back to those early episodes, which we leave up as I don't know, sort of, I guess, in posterity for saying this is where we were versus where we are now. But if you go back and you look at those old episodes, in the first 5, we did them ourselves. By episode 6, I was in Spain for 6 weeks. So the following 6 shows are us doing them from across the planet. And then finally, I came back and we talked about that for 2 or 3 weeks before having Will on the first time.
Well, and I think in that same summer, I went on a trip to Oregon or something for a family reunion and ended up recording an episode in the car.
In a parking lot in like Tillamook or something.
Still in Wi-Fi from Motel 6 or something.
Yeah, well, and I mean, speaking of Motel 6, we had Studio 6 for a while.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Occasionally we'd get together. We'd book a room at Motel 6 because I didn't have room at the apartment to do a show like at night or whatever. So we'd get a ghetto apartment for $45 a night, or if we get a hotel room for $40 a night or whatever, and we'd go over and tape the show.
Dude, I remember like unloading gear into the hotel room and people looking at me like we're about to shoot a porno or something.
Yeah, what's going on in there? What's with all these cases? Yeah, that's awesome. So anyway, and so I mean, to sort of continue on with some of those early guests, our second guest was Anderson Blue, who you mentioned. He was our second interview. He's doing awesome, actually. And if you Google Anderson Blue, that's BLUU. He does like sneaker artwork, and he's doing the damn thing. He's doing great with it. Yeah. And so check out the work he's doing. And actually, if you'd believe it, our third guest was Gina Grad from Adam Carolla's show.
What an interesting get! Like just on the third guest, we have someone of that notoriety.
And what's really interesting, if you look at it, it's episode number 19. Yeah. So she took a real chance on us when we were absolute nobodies and just trying to get figured out how to do this stuff. And she was willing to do that. In fact, it was our first call in where she was going to call us on a phone. And if I remember right, we actually did that one out of Studio 6. And we had to do some kind of wacky configuration where we had like a mic over the phone, and we had like a headphone thing.
We didn't have the right equipment to do a phone call, and we ended up getting some little adapter, and I didn't even have a correct mixer to be able to do it. Like I didn't have any gear for any of this, and we ended up kind of making it work, and it was a real crapshoot if it would work, and it ended up being quite interesting. So. Yeah,
no, it's pretty funny. So anyway, so it's fun to reminisce about that stuff, and we'll probably do a little bit more about that around the end of the year for people who are new to the show. At the end of each year, we do a thing called the Eggie Awards, and we sort of celebrate some of the best shows of the year and sort of just have a little recap on the season or the year. So we will no doubt talk about this a little bit more. But one thing, I mean, I actually don't know how long we've gone on because we sort of got off on this social media tangent, which I think was kind of fun, and talking about GNOME. But I wanted to maybe touch on, or maybe extrapolate a little bit on a couple episodes that we had this year that were kind of interesting.
Well, do we want to, I mean, because we've kind of covered almost a full hour, I'm guessing.
Oh, have we really?
It's getting up there, at least like
fun, right?
40 minutes probably at least. But we were going to play a couple of clips, and we still can if you want to. But I think we're kind of getting to
Yeah, no,
decent length.
let's save it. Let's save it for later in the season or later in the year. We'll, you'll hear the best ofs around Christmas and the Eggie Awards, which we'll be looking forward to with great anticipation. We have a couple, interesting episodes this year that had, fun stories around them and things like that. So maybe we'll just save all that for a later time.
Perfect.
So because I think you're right, Mike. I think that makes a lot of sense. So I guess then to put a fork in the Thanksgiving special.
Are you doing anything cool for Thanksgiving?
Oh yeah, no, that's a good topic. So again, it's COVID year, right? And I don't want to say anything like in these trying times, but our Thanksgiving is a little bit has always been a little bit untraditional in that we. At least as long as my wife and I have been married, so almost 20 years now, or more than 20 years now.
Has it been that long?
Well, hang on, 2003, so almost 20 years, 17 years.
Wow, that's when we met. Just so you know, like
yeah,
I met you. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny. Just a little side story. So I was talking about that the other day with some people. So recently, for anybody who doesn't really know my background or anything from my youth. I used to road manage a band called the Cottonmouth Kings, and I would sell merchandise for them and all this other stuff. And Mike actually sent me a text of a screen grab not too long ago, asking me if I had seen this bad news, which was that this guy, he was called, his name's Steven Thronson, but he went by Saint Dog in the Cottonmouth Kings, had passed away, unfortunately. And so he sent me this text and he's like, "Hey man, did you hear about this?" I hadn't, because I was not spending a lot of time on Instagram.
That was pre me deleting my account.
And so, but obviously that set off a whole bunch of emotions. I had known him. He was one of my favorite guys in the band for a long time. He actually had stayed the night at my then girlfriend's house, and he wrecked on a skateboard on our broke-ass sidewalk out front. And my wife Tia, had to bandage him up and tape him up and everything so he could do the show the next day. So it was pretty fun. But anyway, he was a great dude, and I actually never really heard all the inside skinny to what happened. But nonetheless, he passed away recently, and so I had the inclination to start going through some old things from back in that day, back in the early days of me touring around and running around with those guys. And I came across a bunch of old pictures of him playing at this place in Pocatello, Idaho called Club Mill.
Oh, goodness.
That, doesn't exist anymore, but it holds a significant place for me and Mikey, and that's where we met. And, this sounds like a sweet romance, but basically I was running around with Cottonmouth Kings and those guys at the time. The guy who owned the club, who was sort of a mutual acquaintance or a mutual friend of Mike and I's, had booked the band to come play, and he needed some equipment to fill their rider, to make sure the rider is like the contract that requires, it's the thing you always hear about with like Van Halen, now rest in peace Van Halen, where they, you had to have all the green M&Ms or whatever, it's this thing. And so anyway, but there's a technical rider that comes with it. And this, outlines the speakers and the microphones and all the things you're supposed to bring. And so he needed a bunch of equipment. The only guy that he or I knew that had anything was Mike. And so, and at the time I didn't know Mike, but Justin did, this guy that owned the club. And so he connected with Mike. Mike saved the day by bringing in just enough equipment to pass the rider, because otherwise they were not going to play. and it was pretty sketch for a brief moment where it looked like they may not. And so, but luckily Mike was able to bring in, enough equipment to make sure the day happened, and we had a great concert and all that stuff. And we, got to know each other a little bit at that night. It just, that we had mutual interests. We were both from Pocatello, or living in Pocatello at the time. We were both, interested in music and all that kind of stuff. And so we just kind of hit it off. And, the rest, is a very wild history. We have lots of fun stories. But anyway, so just recently with all this Saint Dog stuff, I had dug up a bunch of those old pictures, and, it was fun to kind of go back and reminisce on that stuff.
Speaking of Club Mill, I actually helped with their last event that they ever had there, and before they shut down. And it was a foam party. And
I love the foam parties. Those were fun.
Back in the 2000s, they were kind of the thing. Everyone wanted to have a foam party. And so I don't know if you remember the flooring in Club Mill, but he had essentially taken
Yeah, it was like plyboard or something.
It was
and
particle
just, like, screwed
board
to the floor, right?
Screwed to the floor, and I don't know why the hell he went that route or what he was thinking.
Cheapest dance floor he could come up with, I think.
Yeah, pretty much. And he ended up like this foam party. Was like the last week he was open. It might not have been the exact last event, but he ended up doing this foam party. And at the end of the night, all the particle board was warped. It was like you were riding, you could, you couldn't walk on it. It was like almost, a foot up in some sections, and this completely destroyed the floor, but he didn't really care because that was like the last week he was open.
Yeah, no, it's funny because that's the second destroyed floor that I have knowledge of. Not at Club Mill, but there's a second club in Pocatello where the Insane Clown Posse came through. And anybody who's ever seen them or knows anything about them, they always bring this like soda called Faygo. That's, from the Midwest. It's not super common everywhere, but you can find it out in the Midwest, United States. And they shake it up and they spray it all over everybody. And it's been 1,000 years since I was at ICP show, so I don't know if they still do that. But nonetheless, they did it to this club. And in their case, they had just put in the dance floor that week and destroyed that weekend by the Insane Clown Posse.
Speaking of Insane Clown Posse, I've heard, and this is just rumor, but I've heard that their annual Juggalo Festival, like they do it every year.
Gathering,
they do this, the Gathering. They actually canceled it this year. And, it's really sad when you're looking at ICP as a role model versus like the president doing campaign tours.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, well, it's so true. And there's so many people that probably do, to be perfectly honest. That event is, I've never actually been there. I've been affiliated with bands that have played it and stuff. And it's, from what I understand, quite the thing to behold. So maybe one of these days I'll get so lucky to check it out. But anyway, to circle back around, just kind of wrap up the question you asked about Thanksgiving. We've got a few people coming over. Over the course of this show, you may or may not have gleaned the fact that we have often hosted Spanish interns or have had our kids in Spanish immersion elementary schools. And so we have actually the second intern that lived with us, this kid Alberto, and his twin brother, Mario, who are now known by the E-Twins. If people Google E-Twins with a Z, they'll find them. But those two guys are going to come and have Thanksgiving with us. Also, my youngest son's third grade teacher in Spanish, she's here too. Basically, they're all stuck here because of COVID. They're not able to travel home. And obviously Thanksgiving's not a thing in Spain, but they're all going to come over and hang out with us. In fact, I just got a text from my wife that Sandra and Victor, her husband, are both here actually.
Nice.
They've arrived for pie baking upstairs. They've never made an apple pie or a pumpkin pie, and so they came over to make some pies.
You should have them make one in a cast iron skillet. I'm telling you, that's the way to go because you get nice crispy crust with it.
Ooh, yum. Yeah, no, I can't have him use my cast iron though. I'm home making stuffing tomorrow. So anyway, but the same group of people, Sandra and Victor, who have just arrived at the house here, Mario and Alberto, and then myself and our family of four, and then my mom are going to be here. Nice. And so just kind of a little intimate get together, a little gathering of sort of vagabonds. And this has been the thing we've been doing all these years that, I think we had started down this path of, basically the last 17 years we had, both my wife and I come from divorced families, and we felt like we should take this one back for us because it was really hard to get to all the families every Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
And we already have to kind of do that around Christmas and everything. So it was just better to take this one back. So we started taking in like friends and nomads and people who didn't have family in town or couldn't leave or whatever. And have always sort of just taken in the stragglers for Thanksgiving. So this year it's made up of a very Spanish contingent, but yeah, it should be great. So what about you?
Just me and the parents. We weren't going to do anything, and I said screw that, and went to Winco at 2:00 in the morning and bought a turkey and stuff to make stuffing. And the turkey's out. Sitting in a brine right now, and I'm going to smoke it. And
yep, coming from here, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm doing a dry brine this year.
Nice.
So I'm going to put that on here in the next hour or two. Although my turkey's not totally thawed, so hopefully it works.
Yeah,
it's been out for 2 days, but it's still got a little frozen texture.
Yeah, I've actually heard that you don't want to brine frozen turkeys. You want it, if you're going to brine a turkey, you want it to be fresh.
Yeah.
And
I actually need to check the packaging too, because I just learned today that many turkeys are brined already.
yeah.
You buy them. So if you double brine them, you can end up with like a really salty turkey.
Well, and that too is another problem, because if you try and make gravy out of the turkey gravy and it's brined and it's really salty, then you get really salty gravy. So,
Yeah.
but
We don't want that. So
Anywho.
anyway, I guess we've done plenty of digression, I guess.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think the biggest thing to get across, and I won't speak for you, Mike, but I just want to thank everybody who tunes in, this week and every week to the Egg Show and has supported us all this time. I mean, we see the analytics, our numbers are going up every week. I mean, people are listening, people are tuning in. Hopefully we're continuing to provide a product that makes people happy. We're providing some useful information and insights to entrepreneurs and artists and everybody who, can take something from any of the shows we've had. So in the spirit of Thanksgiving and all this stuff, on my behalf and probably on Mike's too, we're very grateful for your support and everything. And we look forward to another year coming up.
Yep. Hashtag thankful.
Hashtag somewhere though. We don't know where you'll see it because we don't want
Yeah, because we don't do Instagram anymore.
So we'll send it out in an email list or something, or we'll put it on the website. There will be a
Yeah,
hashtag.
but we won't
somewhere.
steal your email from LinkedIn, because that's some crap.
Well, I don't want to guarantee that. But that's Mike speaking for Mike. I might steal your email. So anyway, great visiting with you, Mike. Thanks so much to everybody who's tuned in this week, every week. And we look forward to some exciting things ahead. So I guess that's it. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.